I set up. I'm going to start with item 1, headed SNC Leveler Incorporated, A Tale of Corruption in Big Business and Cover-Ups, that I had published in the South Asia Mail online newspaper in November 2013. There won't be enough time to cover everything, so I've tried to emphasize what I think are the most important facts and the associated circumstances. Everything will be made available for you to reference online after this event. It's about my wrongful dismissal by the company 15 weeks after I'd arrived in the UK to work for them back in 1982. As we will see, there was serious corruption on the part of the company at my expense, involving continual efforts to obstruct, pervert, or defeat the court of justice while my wrongful dismissal suit was in progress. During that time, and subsequently, there have been continual efforts by the company and its officers to project a public image highly favourable to themselves as an ethical company that believes in good works, partly by organising donations to charities and apparently doing its bit to alleviate poverty. As we will see, the company, known back then as the SNC Group, became SNC Leveler Incorporated in 1995, following its takeover of the insolvent Leveler Incorporated, which took place in 1991. This is the same company that was involved in the widely reported bribery and improper payments scandal in Libya, reported numerous times since about 2010. Okay, let's open it, shall we? The picture that you see here appeared in the Montreal Gazette on April 13th, 2012, the day the RCMP raided the company's HQ in Montreal. The purpose of that raid was to collect documents relating to a bribe of $160 million that the company paid to Saadi Gadhafi in the name of helping the company get a contract to design and build a new prison in Libya for the defunct and discredited Colonel Moammar Gadhafi regime there. And we all know what happened to Moammar Gadhafi. The whole affair is also about inequality in all its aspects. Inequality before the justice system, notwithstanding the charter rights in Canada concerning equality before the law, a contract of employment fiddle, wrongful dismissal, and mismanagement of the economy so as to produce the right environment for SNC, their lawyers, and government bureaucrats to carry on the behaviours described and then cover them up. A key factor in this was the money available to SNC to feed to their lawyers. Another key factor was the failure of the federal government and the Quebec government to support me in any way following my wrongful dismissal by SNC in July 1982. For instance, I found 2 months later that I was disentitled to unemployment insurance benefits. I'll explain shortly how this happened. You will not find any of the Part 2 scripts that I'm reading from on my website. In the section that follows about item 1, the top of which you see on the screen there, what I'm going to say constitutes a large part of it, but by no means all. Rather than open all the links to the supporting documents as I go through it, I thought it better to ask people which ones are of interest to them when I've finished. They are all highlighted in blue, in the usual way for active website links. Scroll up the page a little bit. In 1981-82, SNC hired me from the UK working as a professional engineer during a recruiting campaign in the UK. In July 1981, following an interview in London, England, I was offered a job at the company's head office in Montreal, Quebec, to work on oil industry projects which were active at the time. Based on the offer, which I accepted, this appeared to be a permanent job to last at least 24 months. 15 weeks after commencing work, I was laid off and was then shocked that I could not even get unemployment insurance benefits on account of not having worked for the minimum 20 weeks then required to be eligible as a new entrant to the Canadian labour force. I was told nothing about this 20-week rule by the company or anybody else prior to arriving in Canada. For this and other reasons, I was forced to sue the company for wrongful dismissal. After many delays for frivolous reasons, instigated by S&T's defence lawyers, the case only got to court in 1991, over 8 years after commencing legal action. The court found in my favour, but initially refused to pay. As a result, they had an entire floor of office furniture seized and then sold from their downtown Montreal HQ. When they still refused to pay, they had their bank accounts at the Royal Bank of Canada seized, and then they paid up a few weeks later. The settlement was small, and right from the start, SNC clearly behaved in the manner described for the purpose of constantly forcing up my legal bills in an attempt to bankrupt me. 3 of the lawyers at the Montreal law firm of Dunton Ranville involved in creating this mess were Maître Marc de Weaver, Maître Brigitte Charon, and Maître Paul-André Martel. The first 2 have since been appointed judges in Quebec Superior Court. Oh yes, it's all documented. It is clear from one of the court documents that Maître Paul-André Martel, who is still practicing at Dunton Ranville, was involved in allowing the furniture seizure and bank account seizure to happen. It is also clear that this was purely for the purpose of causing more delays and forcing out my legal bills. It also involved a claim by Dunton Ranville that they had to hold back 30% of the judgment, that is $3,000 out of $10,000, to cover an income tax amount for which they falsely alleged that I was responsible. At the time of the furniture seizure and bank account seizure, SNC were in the middle of taking over Levelland Incorporated, who, at the time, were twice SNC's size and were their main competitor in Canada. SNC paid a reported $90 million to purchase Levelland's assets from a consortium of 8 banks, which had seized them after Levelland Incorporated had got into financial trouble, meaning after they'd gone bankrupt. SNC's then president and CEO, Guy St. Pierre, was also a director of the Royal Bank. 2 documents relating to that. And was still kept on as such by then Royal Bank president and CEO Alan R. Taylor and his nominated successor John E. Cleghorn, notwithstanding the fact that I had told both of them in writing and with supporting documents about the behaviour of Guy St. Pierre and SNC, leading to the furniture seizure and bank account seizure already referred to. Apart from all this, they made numerous efforts to have themselves portrayed publicly in a manner favourable to themselves and their officers, and that involved not only the things referred to in this online article. I'll now say something about the more important ones. Former SNC Group Chairman Jean-Paul Gaudreau got his picture published in the Montreal Gazette when his co-chairmanship of Centrade's 1985 fundraising campaign was announced, along with the 1985 fundraising target of $17 million. He got more publicity later when the campaign concluded with the target of $17 million being exceeded. That was in 1985. Then in 1986, SNC had themselves written up in the first edition of a book titled The 100 Best Companies to Work For in Canada. This book was written by 3 staff members of the Globe and Mail newspaper. Eva Ennis was one of them. Soon after that, they exploited this on at least 2 occasions. March and April 1986. In recruiting advertisements in the Montreal Gazette newspaper. At the time, SNC's president and CEO was still Jean-Paul Gaudreau. And he incidentally is now president of the engineering school called the École Polytechnique in Montreal, and has been for quite a number of years past. Among other things, the 1986 edition of the book said, quote, said that, quote, "The company is considerate, and this applies even to the way layoffs are handled."
Yes.
This is documented on my website, and I have an original copy of the book. Next thing, Guy St. Pierre, whom I've already mentioned, co-chaired Centrade's 1991 fundraising campaign, and then exploited this and the results of the campaign to boost his own image and that of SNC in SNC's 1991 annual report, which was released in March 1992, specifically in the report to shareholders section. This took place after, as I related earlier, he had allowed SNC's Royal Bank account to be seized by my lawyers for non-payment of my wrongful dismissal court judgment, which also coincided with SNC taking over Lebanon Incorporated and paying out $90 million to purchase Lebanon's assets from the consortium of banks that had seized them. 1992, Guy St. Pierre was then elected to the Order of Canada, even after I complained with supporting documents to both the Governor-General and the Advisory Council on Awards about his questionable behaviour. It's all documented. Guy St. Pierre has also been involved in fundraising for the University of Ottawa. He was made a companion of the Order of Canada in 2003 and was described at the time as, quote, "one of Canada's most respected business leaders." 2002, Guy St. Pierre was awarded an honorary doctorate of laws, right here, by this university, University of Ottawa. Of course, the University of Ottawa authorities knew nothing about what had been going on, of course. And he was described on the website as follows: "St. Pierre is recognized for his exceptional business acumen and his forthrightness. He is most admired for being a man of his word and a man of action, which is reflected in his level of success." Complete citation from 2002 says, among other things, "While working as an engineer, he has also been able to repeatedly demonstrate his abilities as a manager and administrator and to gain the confidence of many who have become close colleagues over the years. Since August 1st, 2001, Guy St. Pierre has been chairman of the board of the Royal Bank of Canada. When he assumed this position, he marked an historic first, the first francophone Quebecer to be appointed. Despite this rather extraordinary fact, his appointment to the chair of the Royal Bank was a surprise to absolutely nobody. By the same token, he is also the first engineer to be chairman of the Royal Bank. He took John Cleghorn's job at the Royal Bank, while John Cleghorn took Guy St. Pierre's job as chairman of the board at SNC. All documented. In 2008, Guy St. Pierre was co-chair of a fundraising campaign, then known as the Dignity Campaign, for St. Anne's Hospital Foundation in Montreal, Quebec. As far as I'm concerned, he couldn't care two hoots about dignity. Now I'm going to say a little about my experience with Canadian mass media. Of course, a question on everybody's mind is going to be, well, why try to expose what's happened now, years or even decades afterwards? Well, firstly, there was no internet or World Wide Web in 1991. Printers run out of red ink here. There's this stuff in here that I expected to be printed and hasn't. Quite a few other things as well. There's been a problem with here in the mass media of expensive and frivolous, vexatious libel lawsuits from the people responsible for this kind of corruption. Most media people whom I approached would not report anything or even ask the company so much as one question. Quebec, alone out of all the Canadian provinces has anti-SLAPP legislation, but only since 2009. The only exception is Ontario, which has had effective anti-SLAPP legislation in the form of Bill C-52, only as of November the 3rd last year. We've got another problem of lawyers deliberately creating delays in cases like mine for frivolous reasons, so that they can perpetually argue themselves that they can't comment because the case is before the courts, unquote, so as to excuse themselves and SNC from refusing to comment, thus appearing to excuse SNC, the Royal Bank of Canada, and the Quebec government under the late Premier Robert Bourassa of any accountability in public. There's been another problem with an attitude in this country that suggests that people who get into trouble with coming to Canada to work for a company and then being let go after a short time get into that trouble because it's their own fault. And this is borne out in the November 1987 Quebec Court of Appeal judgment involving Dr. Michael Stanley Short versus SNC, in which judges Milhaud, Moison, and Chouinard suggested that people in that position must assume part of the responsibility on account of the, quote, risks and hazards of changing employment and moving to Canada. They had no idea what the risks and hazards were because nobody had told them, and the reason for that was that this would have been ruled as not admissible in court. Otherwise known as not justiciable. Nice legal, obfuscatory legal term, isn't it? So one of the things that happened was that those Quebec Court of Appeal judges knew nothing at all about SNC having got themselves written up so favourably in the 100 Best Companies to Work For in Canada, 1986, because the judges weren't told. In fact, I had advised Dr. Short to get his lawyer to bring this to the attention of the court. But his lawyer told me he couldn't do it because, quote, it wasn't part of the advertising used to recruit Dr. Short. In other words, they got away with malfeasance and unethical behaviour based purely on a legal technicality. The other big problem we have in Canada is the general attitude and treatment of whistleblowers who report corporate wrongdoing. Whether it's myself or Evan Vokes or certain other people we could talk about. And now, concerning my own experiences with mass media in Canada, I did have a little bit of coverage in the media between 1982 and 1984. And in fact, a now defunct Sunday Express newspaper, local to Montreal, had their reporter Richard Flint interview me and published an article about me on May the 5th of that year. But as far as I know, nobody in the mainstream media picked up on it. And then in early August 1991, in between the SNC furniture seizure and the bank account seizure, I was briefly on the air through CJ 800 radio in Montreal and talked about the furniture seizure. But again, nobody in the mainstream media picked up on it. April the 30th, 1994, I wrote to Dale Goldhawk, including a large dossier, among other things. Dale Goldhawk had a television program. It was called I think it's called Dale Goldhawk Fights Back, if I recall correctly. It's on CTV. But in his reply to me, dated May 26, 95, Dale Goldhawk politely claimed to be unable to report anything on his CTV television program after examining the information I'd given him. It was all documented. April 3rd, 1995. I wrote to then Ottawa Citizen reporter Brad Evanson, who eventually declined to report anything on the grounds that the paper, quote, does not report on things in Quebec, or some such. He also said to me, people get shot in this town and it doesn't get reported. I had sent Brad Evanson the same 172-page book that I referred to earlier. And I recall him saying that he claimed to have double-checked a few of the things that I said and found them to correspond almost exactly with what I said. I'd also approached Ottawa Citizen editor Hugh Patterson about reporting on this some months before, speaking to Brad Evanson. But all he could say to me was, oh, your story sounds a bit too odd. Oh, really? Odd? On what grounds? And he couldn't believe it. Would he still see it as odd now, considering the problems that we all know about now with corruption at SNC Lavalin, involving those huge bribes and improper payments in Libya and elsewhere?
Robert?
Yes.
From what you just told us, yes, it looked like in your case the media didn't seem interested in reporting all the bad stuff that was happening.
No, they
What
weren't.
do you suggest would be a good way to get them interested in reporting?
I've been trying to figure that one out for years. I'll give you another example of how they refuse to report anything. Within a day or two of SNC having their bank accounts seized at the Royal Bank of Canada, I spoke to a guy called Bill Marsden, who at that point was an investigative reporter for the Montreal Gazette in Montreal. He's won a number of awards over the years for his reporting. But all he would say to me at the time was, oh, we're doing something else with SNC. What the paper was actually doing was reporting every day or two on the progress of SNC's takeover of Lavalin Incorporated. Of course they were doing something else with SNC. SNC was being presented as Lavalin's saviour, and the saviour of all Lavalin's projects and all those jobs, wasn't it? So somebody had to make SNC look like heroes. That's my take on this. Then there was another lot of problems concerning MPs and MPPs who could not, would not, and did not do anything when I asked them. That's really a separate story unto itself, and I can name all the people involved. But the key problems here were work overload for the MPs involved, little rules and regulations which made it difficult or impossible for them to say anything, and so on. There's some stuff in my script here which is in red and my...
Robert, is it okay to ask you what did you whistle
I'm sorry?
on Lavalin that made you be dismissed? What was their beef against you?
Lack of work.
Oh, they
Wasn't
just
part
said
of the
they
cause.
didn't have enough work.
Yeah.
No, but you
So-
referred to yourself as a whistleblower.
Yeah.
Why are you?
Why do
referring to
you
yourself-
consider yourself a whistleblower?
Because I'm reporting corporate wrongdoing that was perpetrated at my expense, and more particularly because it was all covered up. Because the people
What
responsible...
was it exactly that you reported on?
What am I reporting on?
No, you said that,
What did you whistleblow?
what did you whistleblow, in other words?
Well, you could say I am whistleblowing now on a company that committed wrongdoing at my expense and then covered it up. So
What was the wrongdoing is what I want to know.
the wrongdoing lay in the fact that they
Wrongful dismissal, that's.
wrongful
Or
dismissal.
wrongful dismissal.
Yes, that's right. Wrongful dismissal in a situation where it was impossible to get work because of the economy at the time, and where I was refused unemployment insurance benefits because of the
They never told you that you needed 24 months
No.
of work in order to be eligible.
No, company didn't tell me. Canadian High Commission in London didn't tell me. Quebec government didn't tell me.
But did your contract say 24 months? It did, didn't it?
My offer said 24 months,
At least, yeah.
So, right there,
or more to the
right there,
point.
they did wrong.
Is that legal binding right there?
Sorry?
Is that legal
Oh,
binding?
yeah, it is.
It's a 24 month
Well,
contract.
it was made to appear to be a 24-month, to be a contract that
Well,
lasted
and
at
the
least
other
24 months.
significant fact then is that while you were going through this wrongful dismissal,
Yeah.
they were purchasing Lavalin.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's not like they had a lack of funds.
Oh, no.
Yes, right.
No, as I explained earlier, they paid $90 million in August 1991 or thereabouts to purchase the Laminar assets from the consortium of banks that had seized them after Laminar had gone bankrupt.
Do you think you were the only one who was laid off at this period, or was there a large layoff?
Good question.
Well, at around the time I was laid off, the company let go something like 1,500 people out of a total workforce of 5,400. And all that was connected with what you might call the collapse in the whole consulting engineering industry from sometime in 1981 onwards, because of what is now known as the Great Recession of the early 80s. And this involved all-time high interest rates of over 20%, among other things. But it wasn't just the lack of work. In my case, the lack of work, if you will, is partly what led to me not being able to get alternative employment, and was compounded further by me being refused unemployment insurance benefits on account of having had insufficient insurable weeks, and that because of a rule that I was never even told about by anybody.
You mentioned that Lavala had paid $140 million to some fellow Saadi Gadhafi.
$160 million.
$160 million, which is almost twice as much as they paid for the purchase of Lavala.
Exactly right.
Okay.
No, that
Robert, look,
yes.
look, if SNC Lavalin did not pay the $140 million, some British company would have gladly paid $170 million to get that contract. And if it wasn't a British company, it would be an Italian company, it would be a French company, it would be a Russian company.
So what's your
You
point?
go now to Dubai.
Still a
No,
bribe.
if you go to Dubai today, not one company that is working in Dubai from the European Union does not pay
Key money is gone.
key money.
Well,
Because I tell you, these ministers who are actually entering into the contract, they don't get enough money from their government, so they do it through the back door, through these other companies that are working there.
yeah, no, I see what you mean, and I realize I've been aware for some time of what's going on. At the same time, this leads to a very dangerous proposition involving the conflating of axioms and reasons, where the prevalence of corruption everywhere in the world is seen as the reason for justifying perpetrating such corruption one more time, or many more times, so as to make that corruption appear to be good, and thus deflecting criticism of that sort of thing off the companies and onto people like me, on account of the fact that here I am complaining about massive bribes like this while being shafted by the company that pays them.
If they don't get
That's
the
a part of
contract,
what's going on
Robert,
in
if they don't get the contract, you don't have a chance in hell of getting a job with SNC Lavalin.
Yeah, but
That's the bottom line.
I'm well aware of that. I'm well aware. That's perfectly obvious. At the same time, it's not my bloody problem.
Justified.
I didn't come to Canada to have my nose rubbed in crappy, stupid, dirty, smelly business poo-poo like that. I came here